It was a frigid winter morning in the small town of Oakwood when Sarah, a 28-year-old single mother, received a call that would forever change the course of her life. Her estranged father, whom she hadn't spoken to in over a decade, had passed away, leaving her as the sole inheritor of his estate. Sarah's relationship with her father had been strained since her parents' bitter divorce when she was just a teenager. Her mother had raised her alone, and they had struggled to make ends meet. Now, faced with the prospect of sorting through her father's belongings and tying up loose ends, Sarah found herself navigating a complex web of emotions she had long suppressed. Against her better judgment, she decided to make the journey to her father's remote cabin in the mountains, where he had lived a reclusive life for years. As she packed her bags and made arrangements for her young son to stay with her sister, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this trip would unearth more than just material possessions. The drive to the cabin was a grueling one, with winding roads and treacherous conditions. Sarah's anxiety grew with every mile, her mind racing with questions about her father's life and the secrets he might have kept hidden away in that secluded cabin. As Sarah finally approached the cabin, nestled deep in the heart of the forest, a sense of unease washed over her. The eerie silence was broken only by the crunching of snow beneath her boots as she made her way to the front door. Clutching the rusted key she had received from the lawyer handling her father's estate, the musty smell of neglect greeted her as she stepped inside, the dim light filtering through the curtained windows casting long shadows across the bare wooden floors. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she took in the Spartan living conditions her father had endured, a far cry from the comfortable suburban home she remembered from her childhood. Pushing aside the pang of sadness, Sarah set to work, methodically sorting through the meager belongings scattered throughout the cabin. Old photographs, tattered journals, and dusty knickknacks slowly unveiled glimpses into her father's life, each artifact a puzzle piece waiting to be assembled. As she sifted through the remnants of his existence, Sarah couldn't help but feel a growing sense of guilt for having abandoned him so completely. The distance between them had been a chasm of her own making, fueled by the anger and resentment she harbored towards him after the divorce. Night after night, Sarah pored over the journals, deciphering her father's elegant script as he documented his struggles with loneliness, regret, and a deep-seated desire for reconciliation. With each passage, her heart grew heavier, the weight of her own stubbornness threatening to crush her. It wasn't until she stumbled upon a locked cedar chest tucked away in the corner of the bedroom that Sarah's world truly shifted. Inside, she discovered a trove of letters, hundreds of them, each one addressed to her, spanning decades of her father's life. With trembling hands, Sarah began to unseal and unfold the letters one by one, her eyes hungrily devouring the words her father had poured his heart into over the years. The earliest letters spoke of his anguish after the divorce, his desperate pleas for Sarah to understand that he never meant to hurt their family. He wrote of his struggles with depression and alcoholism, battles he had fought alone in the depths of the unforgiving wilderness. As the years went by, the letters became increasingly somber, tinged with a resigned acceptance that his daughter may never forgive him. Yet, through it all, his love for her remained a constant, a beacon of hope that perhaps one day they might reconcile before it was too late. It was then that Sarah stumbled upon a letter that made her blood run cold. Dated just a few months prior, her father confessed to a dark secret he had kept buried for decades, one that shed light on the true circumstances surrounding her parents' divorce all those years ago. In the letter, her father revealed that he had been unfaithful, carrying on a torrid affair with a coworker that ultimately tore his marriage apart. Racked with guilt and shame, he had chosen to disappear into the mountains, hoping to spare Sarah and her mother from the ugly truth. Sarah's world seemed to spin as she read and reread the letter, the weight of her father's betrayal crushing her. All those years of harboring resentment towards him, believing his absence was a selfish act of abandonment, when in reality, he had been trying to protect them from the consequences of his own grievous mistake. In that moment, a floodgate of emotions burst open within Sarah. Anger, sadness, regret, they all swirled together in a tumultuous maelstrom, threatening to overwhelm her. She wept bitter tears, mourning not just the loss of her father, but also the years of estrangement that could never be reclaimed. As the sun began to set outside the cabin, casting long, eerie shadows through the windows, Sarah found herself at a crossroads. She could choose to cling to her anger, to let the weight of her father's revelation poison her heart forever. Or she could find it within herself to forgive, to embrace the complexity of human nature and all its flaws. The decision was a heavy one, but as Sarah sat amidst the remnants of her father's life, she realized that forgiveness was the only path forward. It would be a long, arduous journey, but one that she knew deep down her father had always hoped she would one day undertake. With a deep, steadying breath, Sarah began to gather the letters, carefully placing them back into the cedar chest. She knew that she would read them again, each one a piece of the puzzle that was her father's life, a tapestry woven with both light and darkness, love and regret. As she closed the lid of the chest, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. The anger and resentment that had once consumed her seemed to dissipate, replaced by a newfound understanding and empathy for the man she had so hastily judged. The journey ahead would be long and winding, but Sarah knew that she was finally ready to begin the process of healing, for herself, for her father, and for the family that had been so deeply fractured by the weight of secrets and lies. In the weeks that followed, Sarah found herself engrossed in the letters, poring over every word, every nuance of her father's elegant script. She began to piece together a more complete picture of the man she had once dismissed as a selfish coward, a man who was, in truth, plagued by demons of his own making. As she delved deeper into the rabbit hole of her family's history, Sarah discovered that her father's infidelity was not the only secret he had kept buried. Through coded passages and veiled references, she uncovered hints of something far more sinister, a dark web of deceit and criminal activities that appeared to stretch back decades. Determined to unravel the truth, Sarah began to investigate, following a trail of breadcrumbs that led her down a treacherous path. She uncovered evidence that her father had been involved in a long-running money laundering scheme, funneling illicit funds through a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts. The deeper she dug, the more dangerous the terrain became. Sarah found herself dodging shadowy figures who seemed to be tracking her every move, her nerves frayed by ominous warnings to leave the past buried. But she was resolute, driven by a burning need to understand the true depths of her father's transgressions. In a shocking twist, Sarah's investigation led her straight to the doorstep of a powerful criminal syndicate operating in the heart of the city. She realized, with a sickening jolt, that her father's co-conspirators were still active and would stop at nothing to keep their secrets safe. Trapped in a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, Sarah was forced to rely on her wits and the few allies she could trust. A ragtag team of unlikely companions, each with their own shadowy pasts. Together, they hatched a daring plan to expose the syndicate's operations and bring her father's legacy of deceit to light. As the tension mounted, Sarah found herself embroiled in a dangerous game of double crosses and narrow escapes, her life hanging in the balance as she inched ever closer to the truth. She was forced to confront the harsh reality that the man she had idolized as a child was not the person she thought he was, and that the ripples of his actions had cast a long, dark shadow over her entire existence. In the climactic moments, Sarah came face to face with the syndicate's ruthless leader, a twisted reflection of her own father's descent into moral depravity. In a heart-stopping confrontation, she was forced to make an impossible choice: to sacrifice her own principles and betray her newfound allies, or to embrace the truth, no matter how painful, and risk losing everything she held dear. The decision would change the course of Sarah's life forever, forcing her to confront the harsh realities of her family's legacy and the lengths she was willing to go to escape its toxic grasp. As the consequences of her actions unfolded, she would be left to pick up the pieces and forge a new path. Armed with the hard-won wisdom that sometimes the truth is far more twisted and dangerous than any lie. In the tense standoff with the syndicate leader, Sarah's mind raced as she weighed her options. She could surrender the damning evidence she had uncovered, guaranteeing her own safety but allowing the criminal empire to continue its nefarious operations. Or she could refuse to back down, risking everything in a final, desperate bid to expose the truth and bring the syndicate crumbling down. As the seconds ticked by, Sarah's gaze flitted to her allies, the unlikely band of misfits who had rallied to her cause. She saw the resolution in their eyes, the unwavering belief that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. And in that moment, Sarah knew what she had to do. With a steely determination that belied her outward appearance, Sarah spat in the face of the syndicate leader, declaring that she would never betray her principles or the memory of her father, flawed though he may have been. The gauntlet had been thrown, and there was no turning back. All hell broke loose as the syndicate's henchmen descended upon them, a hail of gunfire erupting in the confined space. Sarah and her allies fought with everything they had, ducking and weaving through the chaos as they made a desperate bid for freedom. In a heart-stopping moment, Sarah found herself separated from the others, cornered by a group of thugs as she clutched the precious evidence against her chest. With no way out, she prepared to make her final stand, resigned to sacrificing herself for the greater good. But just as the syndicate's enforcers closed in, a deafening explosion rocked the building, sending debris raining down around them. Through the smoke and chaos, Sarah caught a glimpse of a familiar face, her estranged uncle, a man she had long believed to be dead, leading a heavily armed strike team. In a whirlwind of violence and confusion, Sarah and her allies were whisked away to safety, leaving the syndicate's operations in ruins. It was only then that she learned the truth. Her uncle had been working deep undercover for years, infiltrating the criminal empire in a bid to bring it down from the inside. As Sarah processed this stunning revelation, she couldn't help but feel a profound sense of both relief and sorrow. Relief that the nightmare was finally over, that the heavy burden of her family's secrets had been lifted. But also sorrow for the years of estrangement and deception, for the sacrifices made in the name of justice and retribution. In the aftermath, Sarah found herself at a crossroads once more. She could choose to embrace the harsh reality she had uncovered, using her newfound knowledge and connections to forge a new path, one dedicated to righting the wrongs of the past. Or she could turn her back on it all, walking away from the ashes of her family's legacy and leaving the ghosts of the past to rest. The choice was hers, and as Sarah looked out over the city skyline, she knew that whichever path she chose, her life would never be the same. The truth had been a bitter pill to swallow, but it had also been a catalyst for change, a chance to rise from the ashes of her father's mistakes and shape a new destiny, forged in the fires of hard-won wisdom and redemption. After the harrowing ordeal with the syndicate, Sarah found herself adrift, grappling with the weight of her newfound knowledge and the haunting legacy her father had left behind. Her uncle, a grizzled veteran of countless undercover operations, sensed her inner turmoil and took her under his wing, guiding her through the treacherous landscape of the criminal underworld. At first, Sarah was hesitant, her moral compass wavering in the face of the brutal realities she was confronted with. But as she delved deeper into the shadowy world of covert operations, she began to understand the necessity of walking the line between good and evil, of embracing shades of gray in the pursuit of a greater justice. Her uncle's mentorship was relentless, forging her into a formidable force, a master of disguise, an expert in espionage, and a tactical genius capable of outmaneuvering even the most cunning adversaries. Sarah's transformation was remarkable, shedding the naive innocence of her former self and emerging as a steely-eyed operative, hardened by the harsh truths she had uncovered. As her skills and reputation grew, Sarah found herself embroiled in a high-stakes game of global intrigue, her actions rippling across international borders and impacting the delicate balance of power. She became a silent guardian, a ghost in the shadows, working tirelessly to dismantle the vast criminal networks that had once ensnared her father. In one breathtaking mission after another, Sarah infiltrated the innermost circles of power, donning countless disguises and exploiting every weakness in her pursuit of justice. From the opulent casinos of Monaco to the war-torn streets of Damascus, she left a trail of fallen empires and broken syndicates in her wake, her name whispered in reverent tones by those who dared to defy the established order. Yet, even as she reveled in her newfound power and influence, Sarah couldn't shake the lingering sense of emptiness that gnawed at her soul. The sacrifices she had made, the lines she had crossed, had exacted a heavy toll, leaving her feeling increasingly isolated and disconnected from the world she had sworn to protect. It was during a pivotal moment, trapped in the clutches of a ruthless arms dealer in the heart of the Sahara, that Sarah's carefully constructed facade began to crack. Staring down the barrel of a gun, she found herself confronted with the harsh reality that her pursuit of vengeance had consumed her, leaving her dangerously unmoored from the very principles that had once guided her. In that moment of clarity, Sarah realized that she had become the very thing she had sworn to destroy, a specter of fear and retribution, operating outside the boundaries of law and morality. The weight of her choices threatened to crush her, and she found herself teetering on the brink of an abyss, torn between the relentless pursuit of justice and the desperate need to reclaim her own humanity. As the sun dipped below the endless dunes, Sarah was faced with an impossible choice: to embrace the darkness that had become her ally, or to find the strength to break free from the cycle of violence and retribution that had ensnared her. The decision would define not only her future, but the very course of the shadowy war she had been waging for so long. In the end, Sarah's relentless pursuit of justice and retribution proved to be her undoing. As she knelt in the shifting sands of the Sahara, the barrel of the arms dealer's gun pressed against her temple, she realized that she had sacrificed too much: her principles, her humanity, her very soul, in the name of vengeance. The decisions that had once seemed so clear-cut, the lines between good and evil that had been etched in stark relief, had become hopelessly blurred. Sarah found herself adrift in a moral quagmire of her own making, her actions having long since crossed the boundaries she had sworn never to breach. As her life flashed before her eyes, Sarah was haunted by the ghosts of her past, the faces of those she had betrayed, the innocents caught in the crossfire, the trail of destruction she had left in her wake. She saw the look of disappointment in her father's eyes, the man whose legacy had set her on this damnable path, and she knew that she had failed him in the most profound way imaginable. In that moment, as the hammer of the gun fell with a deafening roar, Sarah felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. The burden of her choices, the weight of her sins, would finally be lifted. She had become the very monster she had sought to destroy, and in the end, her own hubris and thirst for vengeance had consumed her utterly.